Hey guys, hope you're all doing well today. We are going to be painting a sunset scene today in the shape of a circle. So here is our reference photo taken up north on East Twin Lake where our family cottage is. And I'm going to use this as reference, and like I said, I'm going to create this scene within a circle shape. So I'll try to place this image as a thumbnail so you guys can watch and see it as you go along. So I'm going to start by using my tape as my circle shape. So I've got 6x6 piece of Arches, 140-pound cold press paper here. And I measured the tape. It's about 4 1/4, maybe a little over. So just find something that you can use for your circle shape. You want to draw around super lightly. I like using a mechanical pencil just because you get that nice sort of fine point for something like this. And then I'm going to tape my edges down. So I am working on this board here, so if I need to turn my canvas, sometimes with a circular landscape you do need to do that. I think it'll be helpful though to tape this down along the edges. This is just a simple artist tape here. And I've got the rest of my setup with 2 jars of water, which is always useful. One can stay clean, and then the other it gets dirtier. And I've got this nice porcelain palette here, which for a simple painting like this is enough colors, and we're gonna, keep the mixing to a minimum for a simple little piece like this. So there is that. We're not painting to the edges, so I'm not going to worry about that. It's really just to secure it down. So I'm going to start by making my whole circle wet. I'm going to do the wash, so get my background colors in there. You're going to start with the blue and go down to your warm colors of the sunset. Try to leave, some bright spots here for the sun, and then kind of reverse that as you go down. So I'm going to start by just getting it all wet and kind of being careful that I don't go outside of my circle here. I've got a size 12 round brush with a nice point so I can cut in on my edges. And you can perfect these as you add your color in, but you don't want to go too far over the edge because this paper really absorbs the water, and wherever it gets wet it will bleed into that paper and sink into the fiber. So there we go. I think we're good. So that was with the larger brush, and then with my medium brush, I've got a quill mop here, size 1. I'm going to start with my blue up at the top and try to fill in, drop it in. If you want to add some clouds, you would actually be kind of leaving white for the clouds, right? In watercolor, you have to leave your white for the most part. You can always add some in. There is Chinese white watercolor. So we're kind of getting down. We want the sunset to happen, I would say, sort of the bottom third. You could have drawn in a horizon line. I'm gonna eyeball that because it's kind of how I roll here. But if you need to draw in a nice horizon line, I'm actually mixing a little bit of my pink and orange, so I get kind of a corally color. So remember, We want it to be white. We want to leave the sun there, the white of the sun. I could have, again, used something to mask. This is where you kind of perfect your edges. But I will do sort of my bright yellow there in the center and kind of bring that down. I'm looking at my reference photo. I want to drop in a little stronger orange and a little stronger pink right at the horizon as well. And a little bit of this opera pink. You know me, I love to have a little bit of pink in there. Just kind of along the horizon. But then of course we need to reverse it out on our water, so I'm going to take that corally color again, kind of spread it across, a little bit across our sunshine. And then I'm already to my blue sky reflection here. And that came out a little dark, but I'm going to blend it around. Just a little bit more blue on my brush than I was planning for. This is a small canvas, so you have to really control the amount of water in your brush. This is where practice helps. Watercolor is a lot about figuring out how much water to use and what size painting, what kind of brush, how much water will that brush hold. And now I'm just kind of moving the water around and perfecting my edge a little bit. Some of these rough, being perfect if you can be down here. That's why you need the sharp tip, so you can do that detail work. Now, while things are still wet, it might be fun to drop in a few more clouds. It's always a timing thing. So I've got these purple clouds at the horizon. I'm not sure I want quite so heavy a strip of clouds, but they are this kind of lavender purple. So I'm going to, because I want them to blend, and drop them in here. You can add sharper ones, in round 2, when things dry, but it's nice to get a little, blending happening while it's still wet. That is the beauty of watercolor. So I'm going to take kind of my medium-sized dry brush and just pick up a little bit of this water, that little excess water there. And I'm not fully prepared. It'd be nice to have a tissue. I'm going to use a rag and just kind of see if I can kind of blot out. Already pretty dry, but you can blot out a white for your sun there. Okay. Again, while it's still wet, I might just drop in a little more color, kind of layering it in. A little darker orange. It's always hottest, by the sun, at the horizon for that strong sunset. So my sunset is a little bit more towards the center. That's okay. All right, it's drying kind of quickly. You can look down on the side to see if there's still a sheen. That means it's still wet. But I think it might be okay to drop in my horizon, my darkest neutral tint here, at least the line across. It's probably still moist enough that it's going to grow, but I think I can take it across And I won't mind that growing. It'll be the reflection. I'm gonna go really light here. It'll be like the trees growing up and reflecting at the same time. So this is where you can start to give it a little bit of height, different trees. Have fun with it. This is the fun part when you're watching all of this happen. So I keep picking up more and more of the color because it always dries lighter. We want this to be a really dark line of trees at the horizon. So I'm looking at my reference picture, kind of deciding what's next with the clouds. I'm going to add, I think, some more bits of orange into the sky here, maybe a little more purple, and then reflect that down into the lake. So things are still a little moist, a little bit wet in the sky there. Still got my small brush. This is such a small painting that you don't really need a very big brush. So this basically, this point is just adding some pigment, a little bit of water, but the water with this brush is pretty minimal. I think I need a little more strong yellow right around my sun. Maybe not that strong. Got to see what kind of pigment, oops, you got on the end of your brush there. Oop, I'm shaking the camera. All right, maybe a little bit of the lavender, more clouds so that they can be reflected. The lavender is kind of an opaque paint, and it kind of reacts in interesting ways with the other inks, the other paints, but I enjoy using it. So I'm kind of reflecting what's happening down in the water. All right, so we need this to dry so that we can go in and add some more reflections and add our foreground layer of pine trees and that shadow to give it that depth so it really pops. Okay, time for our details. So I'm going to go in and add some more trees with my small brush, my dark neutral tint, which is basically black, a little bit in the blue family. You can use any sort of fine, small brush. I'm going to be shaking the camera again, aren't I? So mostly these trees, pretty flat lake as far as the topography around the lake. This is where you can, improvise and imagine, and maybe you want there to be more trees, more height Mountains. Put mountains in the background. You'd want to get those in before you do this row of trees in the front. Trees kind of went up on that side. I'm going to take them up a little bit higher on this side. So pretty abstract. I don't want to show too much detail because it's so far away. You want it to feel irregular. So I'm going to give that a little bit of a reflection. I'm just going to take a clear brush. Oop, maybe a little too much. I'm drying it and picking it up. A little too much water there. Kind of blend that down. So it's a clear brush. Once it gets a little ink in it, paint, ink, you need to dry it out, clean it out. Okay, so that just kind of blends down into the water scene. So we're going to do some more sort of purpley reflections on the water. A little bit of that is still wet. But this is where it starts to feel like water once you show some reflection along the top, the water surface. I gotta get some more paint on there so you can see it. Trying to be really light. I don't want any of these lines to feel heavy. And these lines will get bigger. See, that one got a little heavy, but it's okay because it's in the foreground. And we do want it to get a little bigger and darker as we come. I'm just using a little water to soften that up. And I'm going to switch from purple to more of the blue as I go down. Shadows tend to be a little more in the purpley family, especially if it's a shadow of a sunset, because you get those pinks, warm orange, yellow colors in there. I probably should switch to my other brush so I get a little more weight in my strokes as I come into the front. And I am still going to be painting some trees in the foreground. So try not to cover it all, but darkening kind of around the edges a bit. I want a little bit of a vignette feel. The trees will help achieve that as well. But then I can, while this is all kind of wet, drop in more color. You have to take advantage of your moments of wet. Not too much. This is where you have to just kind of eyeball and see what feels right. We're gonna have to dry again, I think, before we can add our trees. Or maybe I can let the bottom dry while I add the trees to the foreground on the top. So I want to add some branches with, a dark pine tree silhouette. And I think I am going to add a little boat in there too. So we'll do the trees first, see if we feel the need to add a boat. So because these are all dark and silhouetted, I'm going to start with my branches. I'm going to go with the dark color again. And I'm going to just do these light. This is where it's tricky because you've got the circle. We'll go on the left to the right. So they're all kind of above This is where you say, did I want to add branches or maybe I didn't? So nice the way it was. You want to just kind of feel loose. I'm going to start with that, and over here, this is where I may have to turn my canvas. It's kind of hard to get the right angle and get it to feel right. See, that's a tricky. Keep this. Try not to get your wrist in anything that's still wet. We'll just start with that for now, and I'm going to go to the medium brush. I want just a rough, I'm actually roughing up the edge, the tip, which, you know, it's not great for your brush, but I want just kind of a rough pine needle. This is something that you can kind of practice separately. Separate sheet of paper. You may want to use, if you don't want to use this technique, you could use your small brush and draw in a lot of these details. You just don't want it to feel, just want it to feel irregular, but like the same type of foliage. So that's the challenge. If you get a little heavy, I'm doing angles, so angles down, up, and hopefully can kind of darken around the branches a little bit. It starts to feel like an actual pine tree. Remember, it's dark around the edges. Can't always talk while I'm doing this. A little bit heavier. Remember, it always dries lighter. We don't want this to feel transparent. So drop in a little more color. All right, the other side. Trying to do this painting in under half an hour. I think I'm getting close. Again, keep your the tip kind of splayed out so you can get a little texture in there. Little splatter technique, kind of, you know, with your brush. I'm trying to keep it in the circle here. Almost went out that time. All right, we're getting there. Okay. Be careful not to splatter with your dark color. This is where I kind of need to fill in a little bit around the circle. This kind of texture is tricky around a shape, but it'll be good for you. Practice this. Good for me. Let's see, this one kind of comes out even more. And then there's a little bit of, ooh, it's still wet down there. some leaves from a deciduous tree down there. And this is where I'm going to have to let it dry a little bit more. I can do a little bit. There's going to be a tree in here. So remember to give it some form. And I guess while it's still wet, I can do a little bit of my grass down at the bottom. So pretty. All right, I gotta finish off my edge here. So we have to focus. You could have masked somehow outside of your circle so you don't have to worry about being perfect here. But it's also really good practice to achieve edges like this and do that fine handiwork. So we're gonna leave it at that for now. All right, I'm gonna add some grasses. It's starting to dry out pretty well down there. So again, the same dark color. I may want it to dry a bit. Let's see. Can make it dark. Nice loose wrist. We'll want to do a little bit more when it does dry so that they're a little pointier. Kind of look like cattails or something, which is fine. Give that a little suggestion of the base of it. All right, so look and see if you feel like you need anything else in here. Let's see if I can give this a little bit more. It's a little bit wet, so. Almost there. Okay, last little details. Just a little bit more grass. So it's nice and dark in the foreground. It dried up and I get a little more detail there from the grass. You know, variety and height. This is considered a rigger brush. I think the number may have worn off. Great for it's long, so it can kind of bend and give you that sort of loose feeling, a little more natural of a line. So again, it's a little light down here, so I'm just adding it a little darker. Just finishing it off. Adding the darkest details, because you can see things kind of dry a little bit lighter than you plan for them to. And I may end up going over that a little bit more. With my medium-sized brush too, just to add a little bit more pine needle detail here. It's all in the details. And going darker. You got to keep, you know, adding layers in watercolor to finally get that darkness so you feel the light. Gotta go dark to feel the light. All right. It's hard to know when to stop, right? Just a little bit more dark out here, because it is a little bit light when it dries. You'll feel this later. You'll be glad you went a little darker. It just makes that sunset pop that much more. Beautiful. I think I'm just going to add a little bit more to my horizon, just so that you get that focus, that focal point right in the center. You're creating that composition, leading the eye. There you go. Lovely. Just before the neighbor mows the lawn. Makes noise. Thanks for joining me today, guys. This was really fun. I hope you enjoyed as well. We'll do another one soon. Thanks.